Hi, Siddharth. Welcome to Network Capital. Really excited to host you today. In this podcast, we try and understand why people do what they do. You've had such an interesting career. You've spoken about risk and reward in our previous conversations. But today, tell us who you are and what do you do?
Hi, Karsh. First of all, glad to be here. Thank you for having me here. I am a former consultant, a former banker. I worked in the government of India. I now work in media and entertainment. I work at Disney and Star. I went to IIT Delhi for MBA. I've done CFA, and I went to Harvard Business School for MBA. And for my pastime, I do stand-up comedy. So there's a lot of there open up for you.
To try and connect the dots, like what, from media to banking, ex-consulting, what government of India, what's the common thread? Is there a common thread?
That's such a good question. Often when we plan our careers, we like to have a 10-year vision. While that's great, and a lot of people do very well at that, I do not personally believe that can happen as seamlessly as we want it to be. So, for example, the conventional wisdom is you choose an industry and then you do things within that industry, and that's great. I haven't done that. And the jury's still out whether that's a good idea or not. But what I believe is that as long as you know what you're doing is great and you're putting in your best effort, and then you're open to new opportunities and jump on new opportunities, knowing what the end of that opportunity would be. So, having a 2-year vision, having a 3-year vision, and knowing where you're going is great. Knowing how it will broadly fit into the scheme of things, which need not be about an industry, as long as you have a certain plan in mind. I think we need to think more and more about picking up on the right opportunities and taking things slower than having a grand vision and letting go of some very exciting opportunities.
So that's a really great segue into what we want to understand. When you were to think about the foundational years in school or college, how different is your life today to what you thought it would be, say, 10 years back?
10 years back, I was in IIT doing all sorts of things which I was not necessarily didn't enter IIT to do those things. I was involved in dramatics, in debating. I would run the debating club. I was helping run student festivals and doing all sorts of things which one might say, how does that
not engineering
per se.
Yeah.
While of course that is why we go there, and if I could do it all over again, I would have paid much more attention to getting a higher GPA. But that's all hindsight. I think the important thing then, as is now, is that I was doing things which I love doing, and I was really putting my heart and mind and soul into those things. A lot of that actually helped me later on. And we often don't realize what we do once can help me later on. For example, I did CFA and then left banking. However, when I was in the government at the finance ministry, having a CFA education really, really helped me because, I could just understand so many concepts which otherwise as an engineer I could not. Or for instance, at IIT, if I would get involved in Hindi debating, which a lot of people do not, that helped me later write speeches in Hindi. So a lot of things we do, we don't feel where it will get utilized. I don't think that's the right attitude either. When you're young, you should do different things. You should enjoy what you're doing. And, dots will connect backwards later on.
So, but again, did you think you would be doing what you did?
Not at all.
Yeah. There must be some vague idea, right? Was business school in the horizon? Investment banking?
Sure. Yeah, I think the one thing which I did know was that I want to get into the business side of things and not necessarily the engineering or research sides, which is why...
Why?
It's not that one is better than the other. It's a matter of personal choice. Some people enjoy being an engineer and doing that sort of things more. Some people enjoy a more academic career. Some enjoy a more, say, a public policy career. To each their own, and I can give you pros and cons of each. But there is a certain charm which I had towards business. It also lets you do different things, right? You can grow things. You can help generate employment. There's a lot of value given to what you do. What you do is directly attributable to you often. So I was always charmed by getting into the business side. So either consulting or banking, I very much knew I have to do either of the two after IIT.
And MBA was also on the horizon in college.
The problem is that as an Indian male engineer, you're very scared about getting a good MBA because this is the most difficult pool. You can do good things in your career and you can get good recommendation and a good GMAT score, but even then, you don't know whether you'll end up going into business school, good business school. So while yes, I always had it at the back of my mind that it would be great to do a good MBA, I was also very skeptical about it, that whether I'd be able to get into a good school or not. So it was like that.
And after college, like you had an adventurous 4 years in college, really tried to explore different kinds of options. Then you did investment banking.
That's right.
Right?
Yes.
So how did this idea and opportunity to work in the government arise, and how did you leverage it?
So when I was graduating from IIT, I won the Giant Sinha Award. Why did I win that? Because I did all those other crazy things like extracurricular activity basically. So it was an award given to a person who's done the most amount of extracurricular activities, and the award is given when we graduate. So I got the Giant Sinha Award. I didn't know who Jayant Sinha was, and some of us might know. Later on, he went on to become a minister in the first Modi government. So one day, February 2014, in the Economic Times, I read Jayant Sinha joins politics full time, and I thought, this is the same Jayant Sinha whose award I got, and I know who the person is. I also knew of his father and what a illustrious career he had. So I sent him a LinkedIn request, fully knowing that there's a 99% probability he will never ever see it, but doesn't hurt. I told him I want to work with him. He was helping work on the BJP's economic policy at that point of time. I got his email. I then sent him an email. I told him I'm a Jayant Sinha Award recipient. He also went to IIT Delhi and then to Harvard Business School also. So we both went to IIT Delhi. I had a common connection of the award. I told him about my profile. He liked my profile. He said, why don't you come work with me? And the work on policy side is pretty much done. Why don't you come work for me for an election campaign in Hazaribagh, Jharkhand. Hazaribagh is a very unique place. It's far away from Bombay in every sense of the word. It's Naxalite affected, it's poverty affected, it's disease affected, and it hasn't historically been in a bad shape. It's everything which needs to change about India you would see in those parts of Jharkhand and Bihar, etc. So as anyone would tell you, is that that's a bad idea, and there's no way you can leave your job and just go jump into something which is as crazy as that. Politics is not for people with IIT degrees or good decent jobs. I took that risk, and let's talk about that in a second. But I didn't.
And you were one of the earlier people who decided to jump
That's
into
a fair
this space,
point.
right?
I think a few years later, a lot of people started jumping in. Some have done really well. Some actually have not done so well, and they've struggled by taking this call. I could have been exactly in that position myself. I just got lucky. I had a great relationship going on with Mr. Sinha. He became a minister. He pulled me into his office. I became his...
But explain this in more detail,
Okay.
because I want everyone listening to really have this mental model clear. When you take a risk, what are the specifics of that risk? And when you reap the reward, what are the specifics of that reward?
The example which I was giving at your earlier event, if you buy a Government of Argentina bond or one of those default bonds, they'll give you 25, 30, 35%. You buy a Government of United States bond, it'll give you 3-4%. Or in simpler terms, you buy corporate debt in India, it gives you 12, 13%. You buy Government of India debt, it gives you 7-8%. Why? Because it's all about risk. Reward comes with risk, and with risk there is reward. So the challenge is that often we expect and we want to do great things, but we're not ready to take that risk. That's not going to work. You can get very lucky and things might work out, but let's say if things go the way they're meant to be, you have to take a certain amount of risk to get a certain amount of reward. So if you want to do some cool things in the government and go work at North Block, you can't keep working in your normal job. If all you ever do is all you ever done, all you'll get is all you ever got. So there's nothing.
That's a quotable quote. I must
not
say.
mine. It's not mine. But I like using it. So you have to be cognizant that you need to take those big bets. By the way, there's nothing wrong if you don't want to take that big bet. If you have a good job going and everything's going great, I would insist that there is a lot of merit in not leaving it and continue doing it and be happy, and that's a great career too. Then you don't need to have FOMO of missing out on some of the bigger opportunities. But then you chose that career for yourself. You chose a low risk trajectory and you've done very well. So people get it wrong both ways. They either want big rewards without taking the risk, or on the flip side, they don't take risks and then have a good career, but then they feel that I missed out on the big rewards. So just be mindful that there is the correlation, and be mindful of what you are jumping in. There is no right level of risk. It's all about risk appetite. Everyone has a different one. Realize your risk appetite. Be confident of what you're doing, and then let things play out.
So that was the principle that you used. So how much time did you spend with Mr. Sinha? And what were some of the highlights as well as challenges of that time you spent?
So I worked in actually different capacities with him. I worked for a couple of months at his campaign, and that was one kind of work. And then for a few months, 4 or 5 months, I worked when he was a member of parliament, not a minister. And that was again a different kind of work. And then finally, for about little less than 2 years, I worked in the government of India, first in the finance ministry and then briefly at the aviation ministry. It's a very exciting place, the government of India. As an outsider, of course, I had no clue about it. The machinery is massive, so as a result, things move slow. And these days we're all complaining about the economy, of course. But part of it, while I'm not trying to say that, not trying to take sides or defend, but it's very difficult to move this massive machinery in this big country. So. That was one of the key challenges, because there were so many layers of hierarchies and so many people involved.
And you were an outsider.
I was a complete outsider. I was a 27-year-old kid dressed in a suit with a big fancy office. People would enter and ask me, I want to meet Siddharth. I'm like, no, that's actually me. Like, what the hell is this kid doing here? So I was a complete outsider. And, what I also realized then is that the concept of power is very complicated. Just because rank does not always dictate power. It's also very relationship driven. You derive power by how you interact with people and how much they respect you, how much they trust you, etc. So just because you have a position, a nominal authority, it will not give you any power. And by the way, in those settings where you would see bureaucrats around you and politicians around you, you would see some very good people doing that, both in a good and bad way, right? You can use your power for bad, but you can also use your power of relationships to actually drive things forward, which I used to learn from my boss, Mr. Sinha, who was phenomenal at that. Personal relationships and building those and nurturing relationships and then driving things forward. So that was another thing, that just because there is a certain process in a big complex organization, that process could be followed only in theory, but the nuances and the practical nuances are much more complicated.
Right. And in terms of your learning when you're applying to school, how did you connect the dots? Because then you have to actually connect the dots, right?
Yeah.
So,
it's funny. I started writing, like the first few sentences of my business school application are how I fell in love. And that was literally the first line. Last year, I fell in love at first sight. And I then talk about me marrying my wife. So I was very candid in my applications. I said that, look, it's not that I've had a great 10-year plan or that I even have one right now. I can tell you roughly the things I want to do. But I made it about a few other things in life. I said that I think my life is based on the relationships I make, the decisions I take, and the boundaries I break. And I very firmly believe that to date. What relationships you've made in your life, when have you gone ahead and broken boundaries and done things which people have not conventionally done? What risks have you taken in life, as I was talking about earlier? So that was my essay.
And what a great line to start it on. How did you talk about failures? Because working in the government gives you ample opportunity to fail and succeed at various levels.
Yeah. Well, not particularly in the essay per se, but I think as a country, as a people, we're very averse to accepting failures or weaknesses. And I think I'd learned this at business school. It takes a certain amount of confidence to be very, accepting of failures. I don't think we do that. I wish we would sit back and reflect more often on our failures, because everyone fails all the time. And the one common mistake which people make in their essays is almost like they follow a template. First they'll start by, this was my childhood, this was the challenge, this was the inspiration. But after that, I have been rock star. I did X and I was amazing. I did Y, I was amazing. I did Z, I was amazing. So my life is a story of me being, the chosen one. No one's the chosen one. And I think a great school application should ideally show an arc that, yes, you've done good things, but you've also suffered, failed, learned, stood up and done things better. For instance, at Harvard, I can tell you, a lot of focus is about learning from yourself and from your peers. So reflecting on things you could have done differently. And I think there's a lot of value in doing that. I told you I like doing comedy. My biggest critique is myself. When I am going for a show or I've done a show, I just listen to my own rehearsal, so to say, like several times. I keep critiquing myself that, you're doing this wrong and you're doing this wrong. And then, it improves. So my point being that if you can comfortably, confidently accept that you're wrong in so many things and that you have weaknesses and that you can improve, you'll do great justice to yourself.
So if you went to HBS with 5 years of experience? More?
That's right.
5?
Yes.
So in the initial, when you were in reflection at school, what could you have done differently in the 5 years? What feedback were you giving yourself? Because coming to HBS, you must be also very proud and happy that you've made it to such a good school. But did you also tell yourself what are the things that could have been different, better?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the best parts of school was that I came in feeling I've done good things. I left feeling I've done nothing. And
how did this happen? Peer effects mostly?
Peer effects. It's a nice time to reflect on your life, not just to see that other people have done great things, which of course they have. But it's not about that. I think it's more about getting exposed to so much more which is going on in different parts of the world, across industries. You read about that through cases or through so many other ways in which the school teaches you. But you start realizing that how insignificant it is what you've done, and there's so much more to be done. And then the other thing which I personally thought a lot about is that, HBS has this particular sentence, and they try to push it a lot, that it's your one wide, precious life. How will you make it different? And they keep asking you, what difference will you make in the world? And that's something which matters to me. At some point of time, I definitely want to do something on that sort. But the question in my mind is, how can you make business and societal good work together? And of course, people are trying to crack these problems all the time. I try to think about them myself. But these thoughts of how less I know and there's more to be done in the world, these were things which business school ingrained in me. So coming back to answer your question, I wish I could have had much more empathy when I'm talking with people, be that in a negotiation or getting things done, to understand what is going on in someone else's mind. In any job I've done, I continue to try to do that. But that is something HBS made you do very well, to ask for feedback, to continuously keep asking everyone for feedback. And that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. It just means
that you want to get better.
What I want to get better, that you're trying to improve and you're trying to get better. So taking feedback, having empathy, and lastly, the school teaches you to have a big vision. Whatever you do, it could be the simplest things, and you can get trash collected for that matter. In fact, I met a unicorn who was collecting trash. So whatever you do, it needs to be big. You need to have a big vision, and that's again something which stuck with me.
And now, do you have a sense of where you want to take your life?
Of course not.
Of course not.
Of course
Great.
not.
Tell us more about that.
No,
so walk me through the process of picking consulting after business school and then moving away from consulting.
Yeah.
And is there a macro plan that you're working
No,
towards?
well, it was also a plan driven by a lot of practical considerations.
So walk us through that, because through
Yeah.
the podcast we really want to try and understand why people do what they do and what are some of their successes and failures. Like, who should and shouldn't pursue an MBA? What can you tangibly expect to get out of it with an Indian passport of it, say from whatever passport you have? What are some things that people should be mindful of when they're pursuing such a thing?
So the first thing which has driven some of my decisions is how do you make your personal life work?
Yeah.
And I think that is unfortunately something which people just don't think about.
Yeah.
And you almost feel like right now I'm solving for professional and not personal. My wife stays in India, and for me it's very important to stay with her or near her, and we've been trying to make that work. So that is a very important consideration. If you have a partner in India who does not want to move there, you can't keep staying away forever. The other challenge is that if you're going for school, let's talk very practically. You'll be spending anywhere between 200 to 250,000 USD. That's a lot of money. and it's fine if you're working there, and you can come to the challenges of doing that. But if you're working there for a few years, you can pay it off. But to come back to India with a rupee salary, it gets again more and more challenging. So financial is one thing people should be very concerned about. The other thing is often it's a bet worth evaluating. So if you're going to top 10 schools, that's one thing. If you're going, say, schools is ranked 20 to 50, let's say, a lot of people do. But then be mindful that it will be slightly difficult to get a good job because the best jobs are finite. A lot of good jobs will not be open to you. You mentioned about the passport earlier, like a good 1/3 jobs, very roughly we're saying, would not be even open to you. You won't even be able to apply.
And you wrote a piece on this as well, right?
I did. I wrote a piece.
We're going to put the link of that in the show notes.
Great. It says, I wrote a piece on the hard bus saying that, you should be mindful that a lot of the jobs are not open for you. And it's a complicated problem, involves politics, of course, and international relations. It's a complicated one, not for us to solve. But we should at least be mindful that we are getting into that. And just getting into the school is not if you're 22, 23, you think my target is to get into a school. But really there is more to it after that. You need to pay off your debt. You need to be at the right place. You need to have had the appropriate jump in your career because of the school, which again, a top 10 school is more likely to give you than a school 20 to 50. So be mindful of that risk. Don't just do an MBA because everyone and their grandmother is doing it. It doesn't work like that. You need to know what roughly you will get out of it. And the other sweet thing about a good school is that you enter with one thing in mind. Like I feel like I entered with all the basic road things in mind. Yeah, that good brand to have and network for life and credibility, blah blah blah. All that is good. But then I told you I left with much more. What I don't know, how to think about the other person, what can you do to the world? Like you start, if you're agile enough and absorbing enough, you leave with different things. But just to wrap that up, you need to be very mindful of what you will get out of school, and practically does that work for you, your professional and personal life.
Do you know of cautionary tales where MBAs have really backfired or pursuing?
The jury's still out, but I have seen people who've not had a very good time because if you're in debt and you do not get the job you want, it can get very challenging. Right? You have a $200,000 debt.
The interest you have to pay right after.
As soon as you graduate, you start paying the interest. But even if you can pay the interest, let's say you have savings, you can pay the interest. Even then, it bothers you that I have this massive debt sitting on my head and I need to pay it. And I cannot go back to India where I can easily get a job, but I cannot do that because it may not pay me enough. So while at Harvard it was relatively fine, given there are generally more opportunities, but definitely without getting into specifics, there are people who get really stressed as a result of taking that MBA decision. So again, be very conscious about taking that decision before you take it.
Yeah, and let's talk about specific opportunities that opened up for you or for others.
Yeah.
There's consulting.
Yeah.
There's tech. There's some general management roles.
Yep.
What else out there?
Yeah, so
finance, of course, hedge funds.
Well, finance actually is not as big as an opportunity for Indians often, primarily because some of the best funds, the hedge funds, the private equity funds, they just very few roles, and they prefer someone who has worked in the American market before. So there is a certain bias towards that. So actually, I was just discussing this. In the last few years, I can think of very, very few people from HBS who actually got into a good fund in the US. In India, of course, a lot of people get in. But so finance actually is a complicated one, especially if you haven't done finance before. And I don't mean finance. You could have done banking, but even then, getting into a hedge fund might be very difficult for you. But if you've done private equity and you want to get into private equity, even then it is slightly difficult. So just flagging that finance as a career is challenging if you want to do it in the US. If you want to do it in India, it's relatively much better off. Startups, again, are one thing which are exciting, but often not open to Indians, simply because, they don't have the visibility to make you an offer a long time back, and then they may not be able to afford a sponsorship for you, or they just will not sponsor. They're a startup and you can't blame them. So these two are things. Well, these two and the third, a lot of big corporates which have general management roles often prefer, like think about a marketing company, a consumer goods company. They would want someone who understands the American consumer.
Right.
So these three are exciting jobs, but often not open to people outside the US who do not have American passports. A lot of what Indian people end up doing is consulting, big tech, not as much as small tech, but the Amazons and Googles of the world, and then some of the bigger conglomerates, which have general management roles. I think these three would be the biggest chunk of what most Indians end up doing.
Mm-hmm. And so you decided to do consulting,
Yes.
and of course there was a reason, personal reason, as you spoke
Yes.
about. There was
Yes.
professional reason as well. I'm trying to see what you're doing today on a day-to-day basis. What specific aspects of the training at business school helped you or helps you on a day-to-day basis, if anything?
Yeah.
The reason I'm asking you this question is that many times people ask that on a technical day-to-day basis, does an MBA actually add value intellectually, analytically? I think it does, but I'm
Look,
curious
the thing
to...
about MBA is that, again, you should be very mindful of what you will get out of it. So, if you think you will learn something at MBA and then next day start implementing that at work, I don't think it works like that. In that case, you should have done a course specific to your field.
Right.
So, if I'm in entertainment, I should have done something about that. Or if I was in finance, I should just have done CFA. MBA is not about depth, it's about breadth. What they'll ensure is that you have enough of finance, enough about being with people, enough people skills, enough about the world in general. So it's the breadth which matters more, and that I feel is very helpful to me now in my existing job at Disney. Is that both because of MBA and consulting, both help in a way that any problem, irrespective of industry or geography, you feel that yes, I can crack it, because your skill set has become so broad. And that's not to say depth is not important. Of course, depth is important. Otherwise, you're flaky and it doesn't work. But fortunately, I've done CFA and all that, so I understand some of that part also. The real value is that you can, when you work for a senior leader like a CEO or someone, problems which come to them are as diverse as they could be, right? It could be anywhere from financials to a people issue to a PR issue or whatever. If you are trained as broadly as that, you'll be able to help. And I think that's the single biggest benefit of MBA.
Right. I just feel that somewhere down the line, you might still be contemplating or thinking about a career in the government. Maybe it's a second love. Is that right or no? Some people sent me this question, so I'm asking it to you.
Look, the way it stands today, firstly, I think one thing, and this is a separate point I want to make to anyone who considers working in the government, you have to be in a senior, meaty, meaningful role. If you're helping some politician run their social media account, or if you're writing papers which could be excellent papers but no one's reading, what's the point? So I think important that whatever you do, it should be a senior role. Now, for me, so either if you're that excited about it, you get into the IAS, you go become a bureaucrat. If you don't want to do that, just realize that your options will get more and more limited. So to answer your question, firstly, I know that I will not do what I was doing before, because that will not be as much fun. I want to do something different.
Right.
So really, the number of options which are restricted to me is that either I become such a big an expert, and get nominated to a post, which of course I'm not. Not for the foreseeable future, or I get into politics and actually run for office. Yeah. And that one is a complicated one. I don't think it requires years and years of hard work. You need to be very thick-skinned. Your personal life takes a back seat. You don't make money. Lifestyle is extremely difficult. So it's a very challenging thing to do, and I don't think I'm there.
Well, great. This has been such a delight. I was just wondering if there's any parting advice for anyone, because you've pursued so many things, from a stand-up comic, advice from a stand-up comic, MBA aspirant, anything that you'd like to say which we haven't covered here, or a question that you wish more people asked about careers.
Yeah. Few things. Firstly, try different things. There's a lot of value in that. You need to try multiple things and give it your best. That doesn't mean just switching from one thing to the other. That means giving all those things your best. I think the one big advice I'll give people is that, and this might sound very, very basic, but that eventually it's all about the effort you put in. You can want to do a lot of things, but often people put in effort early on and then it fizzes out. you need to keep reminding yourself of putting in that effort all the time, and believe me, we were capable of doing so much more than we think this are. Again, this sounds very plain vanilla advice, but I think it's the single most important advice I've ever thought about. And finally, just the importance of relationships, both on the personal and professional front. You can move wonders at workplace by developing good relationships and investing in people and generally caring about them. And never ever let your personal relationships take a backseat. Be that with your family, your loved ones, your spouse, your wife, or your partner, whoever. Eventually, they will stick. And the life is much more about living with them, and whether you have a nice, happy. If you don't have a happy personal life, you will not have you're less likely to have a happy professional life. So stay very invested in your profession, in your personal life. And that's the last thing I want people to remember.
Wonderful. This has been a delight, Siddharth.
Thank you
so much. I mean, this has been so useful because you've made a complex career trajectory from stand-up comedy to consulting to working in the government to working now in media and entertainment seem like something that's achievable and can be tackled with effort and mental models and clarity of thought. So thanks very much. And of course, thank you for the acoustical challenges that you managed. Appreciate it.